Hey guys, today I'll be teaching you how to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. Number 1. Knowing the required algorithms. So there are mainly 3 algorithms that you need to keep in mind when you're starting to solve a cube blindfolded. So here are the 3 algorithms. The first algorithm switches the 2 edges. The second algorithm switches 2 corners. And the third algorithm is used for parity, which I'll be discussing when I go through a case where a parity is really required to learn. Number 2. What is a buffer piece and how it works? So basically for Rubik's Cube there are 2 buffer pieces. One is this edge piece and for corners it is this piece over here. So basically a buffer piece in a Rubik's Cube is something which is the only piece which has a permission to be swapped with any other piece on a Rubik's Cube. For example, here's what I mean. I have this yellow and orange edge piece over here. And if you notice the buffer piece, you already know that this is going to be a buffer piece in every single solve. Now it can be anywhere in the cube. For example, it can be like this, but then keep in mind the buffer piece always needs to be this piece. So let's get started in this example. So here I notice a yellow and orange which needs to go over to this yellow spot and this orange spot. So basically if I want the yellow to swap with here, that is I want the orange sticker on top over here. Now, as I said, the buffer piece is the only piece which has a permission to swap with other pieces. For example, if I want to swap this green yellow first, that is not possible because I first want the green yellow to come down to the buffer. And to do that, I either need to first do this to set it up. I can then do the first algorithm which I showed you, which swaps these 2 edges and then restore this back so that I'll have this piece over here. But then I'll have the buffer location solved, which I don't want. So in this case, it is very obvious that you just need to start swapping in which the buffer piece already is. In this case, the yellow orange. So for here, I am going to do something like this. Then I'm going to swap this. And then I'm going to restore back in. Now the reason you need to restore back is because if I don't restore, for example, it's going to be like this. You notice that there's absolutely no point in why you're switching edges, because if the edges are not getting solved where they need to be, there's no point in why you need to switch edges, and that's the only reason when you're setting up something you need to restore it back in as well. Now we need to swap this orange, and this orange needs to come over to here. And now the yellow green also goes back here, which means that we are going to almost solve the cube. And if you're wondering what happens to these 2 corners, you'll automatically see what happens to them. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to do the switching algorithm. And then I'm just going to restore it back in. So basically the switching algorithm also swaps these 2 corners, but once you do the corner execution, these 2 will swap back again, and if there is a parity required, that also swaps these 2 corners back, so that isn't a big problem. Let's also take a quick look at lettering the cube. This piece is known as piece A, B, C, D, move over to here, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, and then keep your cube like this on how you started and just move down, U, V, W, X. Number 3, new cycles. So basically what a new cycle means is that once your buffer location gets solved. Now in the first example that I showed you, we had 3 swaps to be done, and in the third swap, that was the final swap, only then our buffer got solved, which means that the whole cube was actually solved by that time, so you had no problem. But there are some times when the buffer gets solved during the middle of your execution. Here's what I mean. So let's take a quick look. We have white green which needs to go to here. And specifically looking at this sticker, it needs to come to here, which is the location C. And C needs to go back to B. And if you know, B is the buffer position for us. So we have already ended a cycle and we need to start a new cycle now. So what a new cycle is basically when you have the buffer solved, you need to replace it with another unsolved edge on the cube. It can be any other unsolved edge, but make sure it is unsolved and not solved. So I'll just take this edge for example, and this is position D. So currently I have C, and then I have B, and then I have D. But there is a mistake over here. The mistake is that you never need to remember anything for the buffer position. For example, this goes to C, and then because this goes back to the buffer, you don't need to remember the B, or this is M, which is also part of the buffer. So if it's B or M, you never have to remember it. But once you're starting a new cycle, you need to start and end the cycle with the same piece. So for the first part, it's only C which I have to remember, and then it's D. So D needs to go to A, which needs to go back to D. Now here I need to remember the D at the starting and end because it's a new cycle, but for the first cycle you don't have to remember from where it starts and where it ends. So our execution is going to be C, which goes to D, which goes to A, which goes back to D. So here's how it's going to look. So first we'll bring down C. Now you notice that the buffer is solved, so we need to start the new cycle, and you remember its position D. Then its position A. And at last you have again D. And that solves the edges. So basically you just need to repeat this kind of process for each and every edge on the cube, and you'll be almost done with all your edges. Now there's something to keep in mind. You can either have to remember 11 edges, or you can sometimes have 12 edges to remember, sometimes 13 or even 14. The most average number of edges you always remember is going to be 12, but there are chances that you have to remember sometimes less or more than that. Now if for example you remember an even number of edges and you recognize that you just need to do 12 or 14 edges or sometimes even 10 edges, then you can just move on to your corner execution. But there are sometimes cases where you remember 11 or 13 or something like that, which is an odd number. And whenever you remember an odd number of edges, you need to do the parity algorithm, which you already know how it goes. If you forgot, you can go back and check how the parity algorithm works. So basically you just need to you should not change your cube's orientation. You just need to hold it however it is, and then just do the parity algorithm and you're done. Now I said that the average number of edges you always will remember is 12. But if you have, for example, something like this where you have a solved edge over here, and no matter how many solved edges you have, the number always reduces by 1. So in this case I have 2 solved edges, so basically I can not remember more than 10 edges in this case. Now in this case I have flipped edges, which means that I just need to flip this edge and this edge. And if you look through our positioning system, this is A, B, C, which means that C needs to go to I position and I needs to go back to C, which means you're done with the cycle. So this is just gonna be C and I. And now we'll take a look at this to start a new cycle. So this is position A, which needs to go to position Q, which needs to go back to A. So it's but basically you just need to remember the two, that is A and which goes back to Q. So it's gonna be C, I, A and Q, and you're done. Corner execution. Now for corner execution, the algorithm which I showed you swaps this sticker down with this sticker. Here's what I mean. For example, I have this corner which needs to be swapped with this corner, and if you know, that algorithm also swaps these two edges. So that's not going to be a problem, as if you do it twice or thrice, that actually keeps on switching with each other. So that really isn't a big problem. You just need to focus on the corners. So I need the green of green, orange, white, which is right here. So I need this sticker to come down to here, as the swapping algorithm switches these two stickers. So currently the blue sticker is in the green side, which means I need the blue sticker to come down to the bottom face, which can be done easily by just an F move. And once you're doing the corner execution, these three pieces in the back should not be affected by your moves. It does not matter if you do anything, but just keep in mind these three should not get affected. And now that I have this sticker in the required position, I can do the swapping algorithm. And now I can restore the F which I did in the beginning, and you see it solves the corner. Now if you already know, a cube has 8 corners. So basically the minimum, not the minimum, but the average number of corners you always will remember is 8, but it can be less, like 7 or even 9, something like that. And also if you have a solved corner, that adds up, sorry, that subtracts 1. So basically if on an average you remember 8 corners and you have already 1 solved, which means that you'll only have to remember 7 and not more than that. The lettering of corners goes the exact same way as the lettering of edges, and here it is: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, then move here and move down, U, V, W, X. A really important thing you need to keep in mind is that you need to do the parity algorithm only if you have recognized an odd number of edges and an odd number of corners. If you have remembered an odd number of edges but an even number of corners, or an odd number of corners and an even number of edges, it means that you have gone wrong in the memorization. But if you have recognized even number of edges and corners, then you can just continue a smooth transition directly from edge execution to the corner execution. Memorization techniques. So it can be really hard to remember 12 edges and 8 corners on an average, and I do understand that it's really hard. So you need to come up with an easy way to remember all of those. So a very easy way which almost every cuber uses is to make a story out of it. For example, here is the orange yellow which needs to go to G, and this piece needs to go to O. So whatever you have, for example, if you have 12 edges, so group them into 2, 2, 2. So basically you'll have 6 pairs, and you can remember it as GO, as go. So that is one technique that many people use. Another technique which people tend to use is the normal pronunciation technique. For example, orange needs to go to H, which needs to go to U. So you can just tell it as who. Now there's no specific word called who which has a meaning, but if you notice, it's really easy to pronounce, and that's another way that many people use to remember certain cases where they can't make up a story really quick. Alright, so if you have any more other questions regarding how to solve a cube blindfolded, or just some any other general doubts, make sure you leave them in the comment section and I'll be free to answer them. And also, if you want a full example solve on how to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, you can also leave that comment in the comment section, and if I get comments regarding it, I'll shortly make a video on a full blindfolded example solve. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.